Have you ever heard that old phrase that holding on to your anger is like drinking poison, yet expecting the other person to die? Now, we all know that we shouldn't hold on to anger. However, we let it in and it attacks the relationships around us. It attacks the relationships with our spouse, our children, and all of the people that we work with. Holding on to that anger is toxic, people. Yet it's one of those emotional intelligence pieces that in leadership, most of us need to grow in. However, generally, we don't get any sort of formal training. And if we do, it's forced upon us because we've made a mistake. And to be quite honest, that training is generally pathetic. So what do? Well, generally, we're forced to hold it in until we burst. In this episode, we're going to talk about that anger. We're going to unpack it a little bit. We're going to look at what it looks like. We're going to discuss things I've learned along the way. And ultimately, I want to arm you with some simple strategies to stop drinking the anger poison.
Leaders are not born in a womb. They are forged through heat, pressure, and a whole lot of sweat. The Fire Forged Leader podcast serves the audience through exploring leadership at work, in the community, and with the family, using a practical perspective and real-life experiences from the host, Steve Baumgartner, and his guests in The Forge. Now, it's time to enter the Forge with the Fire Forged Leader.
What is up, leaders? Welcome back to the Fire Forged Leader podcast. I'm Steve Baumgartner, your host, and I would like to take you once again on a journey of the Forge, where we're going to explore lessons learned on the front lines of leadership. But before we get into it, today I got a special announcement that I'd like you to hear.
Hey, it's Tyler from Cross to Bear. I just wanted to go ahead and take time to say it's December. We're having a concert April 12th, 2023 with Disciple and Decipher Down. But in honor of Jesus' birthday, this whole month, or the first 500 tickets are going on sale right now for $5 off. Eventbrite, search Darkness Will Fall, Fayetteville, North Carolina. And any help we can get, thank you.
So that concert sounds pretty amazing, don't it? So another surprise is I will actually be out there to speak at that concert. So I hope to see you there. Now, first off, I want to talk about the poisonous grasp of anger in general. So the metaphor that I used in the introduction is one that I keep in my mind often because anger is something that I struggle with. I struggle with it daily. Now, looking at it from a firsthand experience, this metaphor is absolutely on point. It suggests that harboring anger and resentment is self-destructive, just like drinking poison would be. However, this metaphor goes a bit deeper and explains to us that we're going to drink this poison and it's going to be self-destructive, but we do it because we actually believe that it's going to harm the other person. Now, in the song, Love the Way You Lie by Eminem and Rihanna, Eminem starts off his part of this duet by saying, I can't tell you what it really is. I can only tell you what it feels like. And right now, there's a steel knife in my windpipe. I can't breathe, but I still fight while I can fight. Now, I tell you, a lot of the words in this song, I don't listen to a lot of this kind of music anymore, but this song really hits me when I hear it because I can really relate to these words. And I'm sure you can too. But I don't really understand why I get so angry. And sometimes I don't even know how to control it. But I sure as hell know how to let it instinctively blow up. Now, to follow that up, Rihanna, she questions back. And I'm going to skip around here a little bit, but she questions back. You're just going to stand there and watch me burn. You're just going to stand there and hear me cry. Now, once again, I and many of us know this feeling as well. Our anger boils up and it bursts. And we leave this wreckage that we have no clue how to heal or clean up. And we rinse and repeat that over and over and over again. We see our loved ones, our spouses, our children, the people that we lead at work. We see them hurt. We see them upset, yet we do it time and time again. And sometimes it doesn't seem like there's a solution at all to it. And we burn these bridges. We burn these relationships. But I also want you to understand the psychology of all this. And I did a lot of research into anger. And these are some of the things, they may seem obvious to a lot of you. But to me, I had to know. So anger, holding on to anger is linked to increased stress levels. And that has the potential of leading to various health issues such as high blood pressure, cardiovascular problems, and even a weakened immune system. It contributes to mental health challenges like anxiety and depression. It puts strain on relationships through communication breakdowns, resentment, and a hostile emotional environment. It also hinders rational decision making because it clouds judgment and impairs cognitive functions, which can lead to impulsive behavior. And ultimately, holding on to anger can perpetuate the cycle of anger. It's like a self-fueling fire. And then last but not least, it can actually lead to social isolation with others because they're hesitant to engage with someone who holds on to anger. So what does that look like for me? What does my anger look like when it's not controlled? Well, I'll tell you, in my past, I caused emotional and physical abuse to the people that I loved. And I'm not going to go into any examples on that one today because it's not who I am in this moment. It's who I used to be, no doubt about it. But I want to bring it up because it's a good example of what it can look like when emotions such as anger are held onto for so long. But there are current examples that I want to share with you. The first one is I still have some outbursts of anger or rage from time to time. And although that this is infrequent, I still allow my anger to come out as bursts. It's like the top popping off. And usually this is simply at my wife. It doesn't generally go too far beyond that. Every now and again, I do pop off at my kids. But sometimes with my wife, I will, her and I will be on different planets, totally different planets about something. And she will say that thing that gets deep down under my skin. And I allow her to have that power. Because then, what do? I pop off with some sort of disrespectful tone and speech with her. One that sets her off now. It sets her into that fight or flight response, which is more often than not the flight response because of how she grew up. Now, I'm coming on full rage. She's retracting because she's in flight mode. And what happens is this generally leads to both of us staying clear away from each other. Now, before I came to terms with my anger, what I would do I would chase. So I would chase, she would run, I would chase, she would run, right? And I'm not talking about in a physical manner, but I would want to engage with these verbal attacks, and she would want to retreat. And that really caused a wedge in our relationship. But now what happens when we don't talk clearly with each other, when I instigate this type of behavior with me popping off, what we generally end up doing is we stay clear, far away from each other. And we might say some snide remarks under our breath. These snide remarks, what they do is they keep that fuel, they keep that fire burning. It's just tinder added to the fire. And what we end up doing is stomping around, making sure the other one knows that we're still pissed. And like I said, I do this with my kids sometimes as well. I try not to be a yeller. I try not to pop off. But sometimes my kids will be running around the house like savages. They don't listen to a thing that I say. And sometimes things get broke. Sometimes we get a hole in the wall. And what I allow myself to do is I bark loudly. And it doesn't help anybody. It causes division. But that's because I haven't taken care of that situation. I haven't gone and redirected the kids. I haven't gone and separated them from the problem, which is boredom or whatever the case may be. Maybe it's that they need to go outside and just play and get it out. I don't know. But I'm busy inside of my world and I get tired of it and I bark at them. It's a failure on my part as a leader of the household in both of those examples. Isolation is another way that I hold on to my anger. And this one currently I'm actually more prone to. Over time, I've really learned how to rein in my anger and not pop off. However, sometimes I do it as a detriment to myself. I go into my little shell and I don't allow others in. Sometimes it's very healthy how I do it because I can walk away and come back to it later. However, a lot of times it brings me back to my childhood and I go into that protective shell where I don't allow others in, and I can isolate for hours, if not days. And that's where I stay. And that's an unhealthy place to be. Now, I want to make note that while going away to calm yourself down isn't a bad thing, isolation is. When I isolate myself, I get stuck inside of my own head and I get more and more angry. It's not intentional. And what I'm doing is I'm actually expecting, if it's an issue with my wife, something she may have said, something I may have mistook, what I'm expecting is that my wife is in there thinking about what she did. And I'm out in the garage or wherever else thinking about what she did. But that's not what always happens, right? A lot of times my wife doesn't even know I'm angry. And she's in there doing dishes or cooking dinner or whatever. And she just thinks that I'm being an asshole, quite frankly. So overall, in both of these methods, for lack of better words, that are common to me in particular, I harbor the rage that I have inside. I harbor that anger. Neither is an effective way of dealing with my anger, and it haunts me for long periods of time when I hold on to it. Now, I want to talk about a couple other examples, and some of this is mine, some of it belongs to other people, but I want to talk to you about these examples. So recently, I had an issue with someone that I worked with. And this other person got angry with me about something. One day I come in and I went into his workplace. And I joked around with him, and he snapped at me that morning about nothing, in my opinion. But that day he showed me that he was angry. And then after that day, he kept his distance for quite a while after that. Now, even though he could have come up and talked to me, expressed what he was disappointed or angry with me about, I want to let you know I equally shared in this event because I wrote this story in my mind when that happened. And it was a form of my isolation, in my opinion. But I wrote this story that I simply don't have the time to deal with all this emotional garbage that people have. I have my own emotional garbage in my life. And if he wanted to act that way, we could certainly just move on with a professional relationship and not have to worry about all the formalities of that. Now, admittedly, it went on for far too long before I finally got to a point where I'm like, you know what? This is absolutely ridiculous. And I called him into my office and we hashed it out. Now, interestingly enough, it was really over two things. One of them was a miscommunication that we had that was easy to clear up when we talked about it. And the other one was simply coming from the rumor mill. He felt betrayed on the second one because he heard that I put in for another job outside of my plant and I hadn't talked to him about it. So he felt betrayed. Now, here's the thing, is that it was just a rumor. And rumors are something that I can't do anything about. But there's two things in here. He could have talked to me about it, and I could have definitely cut it off at the pass and talked to him a lot earlier as well. We both were drinking poison on that one, hoping to hurt the other person. Now, in my home life, this stuff comes up too, right? A couple of weekends ago, my wife said something about the way that I handled an interaction with one of my children. Now, me and my wife, just to give you a little bit of background, we are a perfect couple because generally we don't agree on everything, which, when we handle things appropriately, causes us to work things out and we come up with the best outcomes. However, every now and again, I get a little bit sensitive when she discusses the way that I interact with a kid. Now, this day, it happened to couple with some other things that I was holding on to. One of those issues was what I just talked about before. But I was holding on to some other anger. And this criticism of me drove my anger home that day. I ended up going out. I went out to the garage. I worked on some orders for our company that we run. And I isolated myself out there working on that all day long. Yes, I needed to do that work, but not for this reason. This reason I used it as a means to isolate, to somehow get back at her for that criticism that she gave me. And I sit here and talk about it now, and it seems absolutely stupid because I can't even remember what that criticism was. I just remember the way that it made me feel. I also know at this point today, right now, that if I would have just talked to her about it, that we could have worked it out. We could have come to some sort of reasonable something. Rather, she ended up getting upset with me because I withdrew from our entire family that day. Because I was angry with her, I punished her, I punished me, and I punished my children. We didn't do anything together that we planned that day. But I don't want you to get me wrong with all of this, okay? Anger is not bad. Anger is amoral. What I'm talking about is when we're expressing our anger negatively. And it's on a spectrum. And when we express our anger negatively, it leads to negative consequence. And I hate to say it, but that's how most of society chooses to express their anger. And when we do this, when we express our anger in the wrong way, when we hold on to our anger, what we do is we erode or we destroy relationships, ones that we want to keep so desperately. So now that you've heard me ramble for a little bit, I want to flip the script a little bit and talk about some practical strategies for release of this anger. The first one that I like to use is actually breath work. And the reason that I do this is because you can do it in the moment without anybody else knowing. I prefer to do box breathing. And box breathing is when you breathe in for a certain amount of time, you hold it for a certain amount of time, you exhale for a certain amount of time, and you hold that exhale for a certain amount of time. And you do that in this box multiple times. So I can be in the moment. I can be getting angry, and I can use it to help bring me down, calm me down in the moment. But I also like it because I use it for many stressful situations. Ones like public speaking, and when I'm in large group settings, places that I don't like being in. I use box breathing a lot. And when I'm in my anger, that is just like these situations. My heart rate goes up. I don't think rationally. There's a lot of things that are similar. So I love box breathing in this moment. The next one is I like to give myself a timeout and reflect. So this is where, when we do it in a positive manner, I'll use my wife for an example again, and she does this with me as well. But I can go, Sherry, I want to be able to hear you. I want to be able to understand, but right now I need to take some time for my emotions. I need to take a time out to calm myself down and think rationally about it. So here's the deal. We got to take a break from the situation from time to time, right? Because when I get hot, the person that I'm angry with, they get hot, they get angry, so on and so forth, and we fuel each other. So sometimes the best thing is taking a break. And what does this do? It gives us a chance to reflect on our own feelings, right? So a point in this that I generally get to a lot of times, just like with my coworker, when I reflect on my feelings, the thing isn't always the thing, right? A lot of times there's miscommunications, there's rumors, there's whatever. There's our own feelings projecting upon someone else. But the thing isn't always the thing, right? My wife, when she criticized me for how I dealt with a child, it wasn't because she wanted to attack me. It was because she wants me to have a good relationship with my children. And she saw something as a barrier to that. So when we reflect, we can get down to, what are we really feeling? What does the other person really mean? And that gives us a chance to come back after we figure out a more constructive way to deal with it. And then we can re-engage. Another thing that I like to use in the moment is self-focused assertiveness. And that's a long title, but I was trying to think of something that really described it within the title. Self-focused assertiveness. So this is when we communicate assertively, but we're also calm. So that's the assertiveness part. The self-focused is when I feel myself wanting to lash out, I pull back and I start to use I statements. Well, this is how I feel when you say this. This is how I feel when such and such. Now I know all the guys out there going, I don't want to talk like that. Get over yourself, right? If you want to have good relationships with people, you need to be able to talk on this level. So the whole point is to focus on yourself. right? It sounds selfish. But when you focus on yourself, you're communicating for yourself. When you focus on the other person, you're putting words in their mouth, thoughts in their head. You're attacking them. Another thing that I have to do from time to time, this is when I get really worked up, is physical activity. And it really just clears the head. It helps to relieve that build-up tension. And it also works for stress and any time that you have those same types of emotions. So give physical activity a chance. Just go out and take a walk. Hit the treadmill. You know, there's a reason why people pace when they're stressed. Now, once again, some pacing can be bad. But there's sometimes I need to work things out. I go and I walk around the house. I go and walk around the backyard. I go and walk around my living room. Right? And it helps me work things out in my head. You can also tie this physical activity to your timeout. And then finally, you need to review the day, right? So everything that I mentioned up to this point is reactive. But reviewing the day, this is how you can start being a little bit proactive. So at the end of every day, I want you to face yourself, all right? I want you to look yourself in the proverbial mirror and face yourself. I want you to look at your emotions objectively. I want you to observe how you handled yourself. Now, that could be positive. And I want you to reward yourself for those positive interactions. But it could also be negative. And I want you to really look at those and see how you can reframe those actions. When you work on reframing those actions, what you're doing is you're actually rewiring your brain for something different. Now, I also want you to stop and think about strategies, right? When you're working through these strategies, if you need to take a time out, what you don't do is you don't just get up, walk out of the room, right? I mean, you can see already how ridiculous that is. I don't want you to go, but Steve told me to take a time out. I need to put myself in time out. You could blame him. No, stop all that right now. What I want you to do is go, you know what, honey? You know what, coworker? I respect you and I respect this relationship. Right now, I'm not thinking clearly because I'm starting to get angry. And I don't think very well when I'm angry. And I need to stop for a minute so that I can really think about what you're saying. And then I'd like to come back to it. But once again, you need to set a time limit to that. Let's get back together at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Let's get that on our calendars. Or in an hour, can we pick up this conversation? Something like that. And when you start communicating like this, what it'll do is it'll help that other person you are in conflict with understand, really truly understand that you're putting this relationship in front of winning the argument. And just as a side note, there's a high potential that they might start using those strategies as well. When you work on yourself, other people around you that you're leading start to work on themselves as well. So in closing, anger can be one of the most destructive powers out there if we don't manage it properly. When we hold on to anger, it's most damaging to ourselves. And anger doesn't always look like what we think it looks like. It's not always these violent outbursts. It can come as many forms. And Psych Central states that there are actually 4 categories. The first one is assertive. The second is aggressive. The third is passive aggressive. And the fourth is suppressive. There's 1 good, 3 negatives. So I want you to go out there and I want you to figure out what's your practical strategies that you can employ to work through your anger. The ones I shared with you, the ones that I use: breath work. I do box breathing. I take timeouts. I use self-focused assertiveness, physical activity, and I review my day. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not an expert in using anger the correct way. Now, what I have done is I've done a lot of the wrong things, and that's taught me a lot. I've burned a lot of relationships in my life, and that's taught me a lot. I've had a lot of chances to do things the correct way, and I keep on refining, I keep on working on it because I know using my anger negatively is something that I'm prone to do. So as a call to action today, I would love to hear your thoughts on the subject of anger. You can reach me on all the socials at Fireforged Leader. Now also, I want you to hit that rating button and leave a review for this podcast. Help us stay on top of the charts so this message can hit the ears of more listeners. And make sure to smash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on a single topic.
You have just experienced the heat and pressure of the forge. Remember, words without action are meaningless. Now, after the heat of the forge, shape your thoughts, quench your brain, then put your new tools to use, adding to your leadership. Tune in next week for more lessons from the forge.